Space is never truly silent, at least not to those who have spent years listening to the whisper of stars. Captain Catherine Janeway had learned to hear the language of the void, the soft hum of Voyager's warp core, the gentle pulse of shield harmonics, the mathematical rhythms of cosmic radiation tapping at the hull like distant rain. These sounds were her constants, her companions, the fragile threads that tied her drifting crew to sanity as they pushed deeper and deeper into the Delta Quadrant. But on that day, if day had any meaning in a region where no star cast familiar light, the void spoke a different tongue. It began with a tremor, not the violent shudder of weapons fire, nor the predictable rattle of a collapsing subspace corridor. This tremor was subtle, delicate, like the breath of some unseen giant brushing against Voyager's hull. "Captain," Harry Kim said, his voice barely above a whisper, "I'm detecting a disturbance ahead. Something irregular." Everything in the Delta Quadrant was irregular, but this felt different. Janeway stepped forward, eyes narrowing. "Define irregular." Harry swallowed. "It's unlike anything in our database. Sensor readings are folding in on themselves. The computer can't classify the phenomenon. It keeps rewriting its own parameters." That caught Tuvok's attention. Vulcans do not show concern easily, but even he tilted his head with a fractional shift of unease. "Captain," Tuvok said, "the probability of such an anomaly occurring naturally is low. This disturbance may be artificial, or at least manipulated." Manipulated. The word hung in the air like a shadow. Voyager drifted closer, drawn not by curiosity but by inevitability. The view screen flickered as the anomaly grew from a spark to a swirling vortex of distorted starlight. It resembled a tear in the fabric of reality, its edges shimmering with violent blues and burning whites. A vortex, but not like any wormhole Janeway had known. This one pulsed with an erratic, predatory heartbeat. "Red alert," she ordered. "Full stop." But the ship didn't stop. Voyager continued drifting forward, as if the anomaly had hooked into its very atoms. "Thrusters are unresponsive," Tom Paris shouted from helm. "Warp drive isn't responding either," B'Elanna Torres added, her voice sharp with rising tension. "It's like something is pulling us in." Janeway felt the shift in the air, a quiet tightening, a subtle pressure on her chest. The crew exchanged looks, sensing the same thing. The void around them was no longer empty. It was aware, watching, and waiting. "Shields at maximum," she commanded, even though she knew it might not matter. The vortex swelled, expanding to fill the view screen. Starlight twisted into spirals. Time itself seemed to stretch and contract. There was a moment, brief, fragile, where she saw reflections within the vortex. Shapes moving. Silhouettes of ships that did not belong to any species she had encountered. Angular hulls, triangular silhouettes, long dagger-like monstrosities gliding like predators across an ocean of burning light. And then the anomaly struck. A thunderous roar. Though no air existed in space to carry sound, lights flickered. The deck beneath her feet shook with enough force to hurl 2 ensigns to the floor. Janeway gripped the console as gravity itself convulsed. "Spatial integrity is destabilizing," Kim cried. "We're losing structural cohesion." "Bridge to engineering, Torres. What's happening down there?" B'Elanna's voice crackled through static. "Something's rewriting the subspace around us. The laws of physics are, Captain. This thing isn't a natural phenomenon. It's acting on us." Acting, manipulating, pulling. They were no longer observers. They were prey. Voyager plunged into the vortex, swallowed whole by its roaring maw. The world stretched into a smear of color and sound, every molecule screaming against the impossible forces tearing them apart and stitching them back together in the same breath. Time fractured. Janeway saw fragments of her own memories. New Earth, the caretaker, Array. Chakotay's quiet smile, then saw visions she did not recognize. 2 suns rising over a desert world, a masked figure ablaze with crimson light, warships eclipsing a planet like hungry wolves. And then, silence. Real silence. When the distortion cleared, Voyager floated in the cold embrace of a different sky. Tom Paris stared at the helm display. "Captain, I don't recognize any of these constellations. At all. This isn't the Delta Quadrant. Long-range sensors are picking up dozens of energy signatures, Harry added, disbelief thick in his voice. But the patterns, they're nothing like our warp signatures. These ships, Captain, they're using propulsion I've never even seen. Tuvok examined his console. Captain, sensors indicate that we have exited our galaxy. A breath no one realized they were holding released in unison. Janeway closed her eyes, feeling the weight of those words settle on her chest like stone. Her crew had survived Borg space, survived the caretaker, survived the uncharted hellscape of the Delta Quadrant, but this was different. This wasn't just distance. This was exile. Open a channel, Janeway said, her voice steadier than she felt. Let's announce ourselves before anyone mistakes us for hostiles. But before anyone could respond, a shadow filled the view screen. A massive triangular warship, its surface cold, metallic, and terrifyingly pristine, slid into view. Its size dwarfed Voyager, casting them in its mechanical shadow like a predator blocking out the sun. Its weapon banks hummed with a silent, coiled threat. Captain, Tuvok said, his voice lower than usual, the vessel appears to be locking weapons. Another smaller vessel zipped past the bow, small, fast, agile, unlike anything in Federation records. Its twin ion engines screamed like angry banshees as it banked sharply, looping around the Star Destroyer. What kind of ships are those? Harry whispered. They're fighters, Paris murmured, but I've never seen any fighters with that maneuverability or that engine configuration. Voyager drifted between giants, an intruder in someone else's war. Captain, Tuvok said with Vulcan calm, the larger vessel is hailing us. Janeway took a breath. On screen, the image flickered to reveal a stern-faced officer in a grey uniform, an Imperial crest displayed proudly behind him. Unidentified vessel, he said, his voice ice-cold and imperial. You have entered restricted Imperial space. Power down your engines and prepare to be boarded for inspection. Chakotay leaned closer. They don't seem interested in negotiation. Janeway's reply was quiet but resolute. Then we'll have to survive first. Explanations can come later. The void around Voyager felt colder now, heavier, as though the anomaly had not thrown them into safety, but into a new kind of danger entirely. The crew of Voyager had crossed galaxies before, but never into a place where science bent its knee to mysticism, where wars consumed entire star systems, where power flowed not from technology, but from an invisible force that bound all things. They were strangers in a galaxy at war, and the galaxy had already noticed them. The Imperial officer's face vanished from the screen, replaced once more by the cold, star-streaked void. For a heartbeat, no one spoke. The words, "prepare to be boarded," lingered in the air like a toxin. Suggestions? Janeway asked, her tone calm, almost conversational. The way captains spoke when they were standing on a cliff. We're outgunned and outnumbered, Chakotay said quietly. If we resist, they'll destroy us before we can even test half of our options. Agreed, Tuvok added. Attempting to flee while under the weapons lock of a vessel of that tonnage would be illogical. Bielana cut in over the comm. Captain, I don't even know how our systems will react to their weapons. For all we know, one hit could cascade our warp core or destabilize the structural integrity field. This isn't a risk, it's suicide. Janeway nodded once, the decision settling like a stone inside her chest. Survival, first. Principles, later if there was a later. All right, she said. Tom, power down weapons, reduce engines to minimum impulse, but keep the warp core primed. If an opening appears, I want us ready to move. Aye, Captain. Voyager dimmed, like an animal trying to look smaller under the gaze of a predator. Power rerouted, weapon ports cooled, shields remained up barely. Just enough to appear cautious, not hostile. On the view screen, the massive triangular warship seemed to swell, blotting out more and more of the stars. Green lances of light flickered along its hull scans, not phaser fire. Energy patterns that did not belong to phasers, disruptors, or any known directed weapon. Different frequencies, different philosophies. Their scans are crude compared to ours, Harry said, frowning at his console. High intensity, broad spectrum. They're brute forcing information out of us. That tells us something, Chakotay murmured. They're powerful, but not refined. Do not underestimate them, Tuvok replied. The efficiency of a weapon does not determine the ruthlessness of its wielder. A low hum reverberated through the hull. Tuvok, Janeway asked. We've been caught in a tractor beam. The Star Destroyer pulled them in, inch by deliberate inch. Voyager was no longer free, no longer adrift in the cosmic ocean. It was a fish on a line, being reeled into the jaws of something older, hungrier, and less interested in negotiation than conquest. Captain, Harry said suddenly, I'm detecting multiple other vessels in the vicinity, smaller, faster. They're engaged in combat. On screen. The view shifted. A ballet of chaos unfolded against the stars. Sleek, nimble starfighters swooped past, spitting scarlet and emerald fire. Spherical craft screamed through the void on glowing engines, chasing angular, winged fighters that banked and rolled with an animal grace. That's a dogfight, Tom breathed. No shields, no inertial dampeners I can read. They're flying that close to the edge with nothing but reflex and hull. Can you identify their energy signatures? Janeway asked. Negative, Harry said. Their weapons don't match phasers or torpedoes. It's plasma, maybe? Some kind of gas-based, magnetically confined energy bolt. Crude, effective, violent. And the larger vessels? Chakotay asked. Harry shook his head slowly. Massive power cores, but not warp. No subspace distortion signatures. They're bending space another way. Linear corridors of stable distortion, almost like rails through hyperspace. Hyperspace, Tom repeated, tasting the unfamiliar word. Not warp, not transwarp, something else. There was a silent, reverent beat. Voyager's crew had spent years asserting that the laws of physics were constant, a comforting truth in an uncaring universe. Now, those laws were starting to look negotiable. Captain, Tuvok said, I am detecting an anomalous energy field at the periphery of the battle. Another ship? Negative. This is not emanating from any particular hull. It is diffuse, non-electromagnetic, non-subspace. It interacts with matter, yet does not register on any known spectrum. It is everywhere and nowhere, fluctuating in response to the movements of the smaller vessels. Harry stared at his readings, brows knitting. It's changing when they bank and turn. It spikes when they fire. It flares just before some of them get hit, like it's reacting a fraction of a second ahead of time. Predictive? Chakotay asked. A precognitive field? No known phenomenon within our experience can affect local reality in anticipation of events, Tuvok replied, and yet the data suggests exactly that. Janeway felt a familiar chill, the feeling that came when the universe leaned in and whispered, You are not as wise as you think you are. Is it technological? She asked. I do not believe so, Tuvok answered. The field does not radiate from any engine or device. It behaves as though it were, woven into the fabric of this region of space. Bialana's voice cut in again. I'm getting some of that field bleeding into our own systems, Captain. It's not destabilizing anything, but readings fluctuate when I think about it. That doesn't make sense. It's like the more we focus on it, the more pronounced it becomes. Janeway's skin prickled. Harry, she said quietly, run a full tachyon sweep. Subspace, metaphasic, chronoton, everything we have, and overlay it with Tuvok's anomalous readings. He nodded and set to work, fingers flying across his console. Lines of data cascaded down his screen, merging, overlapping, clashing. His breath caught. Captain, you might want to see this. The main view screen shifted to a layered display. Voyager's familiar sensor grid lit up in cold blues and green subspace currents, tachyon flux, standard cosmic background. But superimposed over all of it was something else. A vast, faintly luminescent web of energy. It threaded through every ship, every blast, every trajectory like an invisible tide that predicted motion before engines ever flared. It wasn't just there. It was ahead of now. Some of these spikes occur microseconds before weapons are fired. Harry whispered. Before pilots change direction, before collisions that never happen. It's as if, whatever this is, it knows what's about to occur and tugs reality out of the way. Telemetry suggests a correlation between the intensity of this field and the survival probability of certain ships, Tuvok added. Some craft are statistically favored beyond any rational expectation. Their evasion rate exceeds the limits of biological reaction times. So something is helping them, Chakotay said. Or someone, Janeway murmured. The tractor beam hauled them closer to the Star Destroyer's underbelly. Details resolved. Gun batteries, hangar bays, armor plating thick enough to shrug off anything Voyager could reasonably throw at it. They were being drawn into a world where brute force had reshaped the stars, and yet, paradoxically, something intangible, unseen, had the final vote. "Captain," Neelix said from the back of the bridge, wringing his hands. "I've traveled a lot of space in my time, and I've seen my share of strange energy signatures, but nothing that responds to intent. This feels haunted." Janeway didn't believe in ghosts. She believed in physics, equations, causes, and effects. But the field on her screen did not obey her familiar equations. It didn't bend to warp fields or yield to quantifiable constants. It arced gracefully around choices and possibilities, as if thought itself had gravity. "Whatever this is," she said slowly, "we can't afford to dismiss it as superstition. Not here. Not now." On the edge of the sensor grid, a new spike erupted sharp, brilliant, like a spear of pure intent, driving through the web. All readings surged in response, their patterns shifting, circling around a single point in space. "That's not random," Harry breathed. "Something just focused that field." "Can you localize the source?" Tuvok asked. "Trying." His fingers danced. "It's on a smaller vessel, different configuration than the fighters, narrow profile, elongated body. It appears to be escorting a larger transport." Janeway leaned closer. "Magnify." The image jumped. A sleek, arrow-like craft, wings splayed like a bird in dive, engines burning fiercely. It cut through the chaos of battle with a strange serenity, fire and death erupting around it but never touching it. Every time a blast came close, the anomalous field flared, as if swatting fate aside. "There," Harry said, pointing to a pulsing marker on his display. "The energy concentration is strongest around that ship. It's still diffuse, but denser. More attentive." Janeway watched it glide across the carnage like a fragment of destiny given form. "This might be our first real mistake," Chakotay said softly. "Trying to study something we shouldn't even be aware of." "We made first contact with that field the moment it noticed us," Janeway replied. "Ignorance won't protect us. Understanding might." She wasn't sure she believed her own words. The tractor beam shifted vectors, turning Voyager's hull. The Star Destroyer's hangar bay yawned open ahead, a great mechanical maw glowing with sterile light. Smaller craft buzzed in and out like insects. Somewhere beyond that steel cavern, beyond those legions of grey uniforms and polished boots, beyond that ship gliding through battle on a tide of invisible power, someone had just turned their attention toward Voyager. Harry stiffened. "Captain," the anomalous field just spiked around our position. Tuvok's brow furrowed ever so slightly. "It appears something within that energy is now aware of us as we are of it." Janeway stared into the hangar's expanding glow, feeling an old, familiar sensation, the quiet, cold realization that she and her crew had crossed an invisible line. It was one thing to stumble into a war. It was another to be seen by the thing that moved beneath it. "Then we proceed carefully," she said. "We treat this field the same way we treat any unknown, with respect. And beneath that, unspoken, with fear." As Voyager was drawn into the artificial gravity of the hangar, the invisible tide wrapped tighter around them. The ship shuddered not from weapons fire, not from impact, but from the simplest, most profound truth of all. Reality here was not ruled by equations alone. Something else had a hand on the wheel. The hangar swallowed Voyager whole. Artificial gravity seized the ship with a jarring thud, the kind that rattled through bulkheads and into bones. The landing struts deployed automatically. Voyager knew when it was no longer free. Outside the hull, metallic clangs echoed as docking clamps locked into place. They were no longer drifting in the void. They were trapped inside a colossus built for war. Janeway stood at the center of the bridge, staring at the glowing hangar lights on the view screen. The sterile brightness felt invasive, like a dissecting lamp hovering over a specimen. Internal atmosphere stable, Tuvok reported. Docking bay pressurized. We are secured. Harry exhaled shakily. That Star Destroyer, it's like an entire city dedicated solely to intimidation. No one disagreed. Janeway lifted her chin. Maintain shields at 15%. Just enough to protect against environmental anomalies. Low enough not to provoke. Aye, Captain. The comm panels crackled an unfamiliar frequency, sharp and authoritarian. Federation vessel, a cold voice said. You will allow Imperial boarding teams access. Any resistance will be met with immediate force. The channel cut before Janeway could respond. Not much for conversation, Chakotay muttered. Tuvok stepped forward. Captain, based on their tactical posture, it is logical to assume they will attempt to assert dominance immediately. We must prepare for contingencies. Janeway nodded, already steps ahead. Security teams to the airlocks. No weapons raised. Hands visible. We don't escalate first, but we do not kneel. The bridge lights dimmed slightly as Voyager adjusted to the new power profile. Outside, the hangar bay bustled with motion, stormtroopers marching in crisp formation, officers barking orders, droids scuttling like insects between towering support pylons. But something else troubled Janeway far more than the soldiers. That field, that invisible, impossible energy was present here too. Inside this hangar, inside this ship, it pulsed faintly beneath reality, like an undercurrent hidden beneath placid water. Janeway could almost feel it, brushing against her thoughts like a phantom fingertip. We are being watched, she realized, not just by soldiers, by something deeper, something older, something aware. The airlock opens. Chakotay and Tuvok flanked her as she approached the airlock. A dozen crew members lined the walls, security officers, medical personnel, engineers, each wearing the same expression, caution sharpened into readiness. The door hissed. White-armored soldiers stood on the other side, blasters raised but not firing. They kept their formation tight, movements precise. These were not Klingon warriors bellowing threats, nor Na'vi mediators armed with logic and patience. These were instruments, tools of an empire that had no need to explain itself. Between them stepped an officer in a crisp grey uniform. His boots clicked sharply against the deck, each step punctuated with a sense of ownership, as if this ship already belonged to him. I am Commander Ravel, he announced. By authority of the Galactic Empire, this vessel is now under Imperial inspection. Janeway met his gaze without flinching. Captain Catherine Janeway of the Federation starship Voyager. We'll cooperate, but my crew's safety is not negotiable. Ravel studied her face as though scanning for weakness. Your cooperation will ensure their safety, Captain. Resistance will not. He stepped inside without waiting for permission. His soldiers followed, weapons angled but steady, ready to fire in a heartbeat. Voyager's corridors were narrow compared to the giant warship, and the sight of the white-armored troops filling them felt claustrophobic. Their presence was suffocating, like a slow tightening of a noose. Commander, Janeway said, guiding him deeper into the ship, your technology, your uniforms, your vessel, none of it aligns with anything in our galaxy. How far have we traveled, and where are we? Ravel glanced at her with mild amusement. You are in Imperial-controlled space, he said simply, and whatever Federation you represent, it holds no jurisdiction here. His tone held no malice, only certainty. A certainty born of an empire that had shaped the stars through fear, fire, and absolute authority. Science meets faith. Tuvok paused by a wall-mounted sensor node, frowning. Captain, he said quietly, the anomalous field we detected earlier is present inside the ship. Ravel turned. What field? Janeway didn't look away from Tuvok. Elaborate. It is a non-physical construct permeating this environment. It responds to intent, emotion, and motion. It anticipates events. It is Adaptive. Ravel's brows twitched, subtle but unmistakable. You speak of the Force. The corridor fell silent. For the first time, the Empire's confidence felt less like arrogance and more like a curtain being pulled back. Janeway stepped forward slowly. What is the Force? Ravel smirked, not in cruelty, but in the way a man smirks at a child who asks what fire is. Something your instruments will never fully understand, something that binds the galaxy together, and something that fortunately for you is not mine to teach. Tuvok's eyes flickered. You speak of it as though it is a measurable entity, yet its effects defy all known physics. Ravel shrugged. Some call it religion, others destiny, others, still, an energy that responds to will. He leaned closer to Janeway. But the Empire sees it for what it is, a tool, one that must be controlled. A chill crept down Janeway's spine. This Force, whatever it was not an abstract mysticism to these people. It was real, tangible, manipulated, feared, weaponized. And Voyager had stumbled into a galaxy that bent its knee to it. The darkened chamber. Ravel directed them into a wide chamber near the heart of the hangar, some kind of detainment staging area, cold steel walls, harsh lighting, the architecture of oppression. A tall figure in black waited in the center of the room. Not an officer, not a trooper, something else. Janeway's breath caught as the temperature seemed to drop by several degrees. The intangible field she had sensed earlier flared, wrapping around the figure like a dark shroud. It pressed against her thoughts, probing, testing, looking. The figure lifted its head, slow, deliberate. A black helmet, a skull-like mask, a respirator that pulsed with deep, mechanical breaths. Lord Inquisitor, Ravel said, bowing his head. The Inquisitor stepped forward, and the very air seemed to recoil. Janeway steadied herself. Chakotay whispered, "This is the source, the epicenter of that energy." "No," Tuvok replied quietly. "Not the source. A conduit." The Inquisitor stopped a single pace from Janeway. His voice was a low rasp filtered through machinery, yet it vibrated with something far more ancient. "Your ship," he said, "does not belong to this galaxy." Janeway met the masked gaze without blinking. "No, it doesn't. Your presence here," he continued, "was not an accident. The Force trembled when you arrived." Harry whispered from behind Janeway. "He felt us come through." The Inquisitor tilted his head. "You carry technology beyond the Empire's grasp," he said. "Warp, replication, transporters, tools that defy the limitations of hyperspace lanes. These things will not remain yours." Janeway's pulse sharpened. "We're not here to threaten you." "But you do," he replied, "by existing." For a moment, the chamber held only silence. Then, the Inquisitor raised his gloved hand. The air tightened. Reality flexed. And Janeway felt time's no, sensed time's pressure on her thoughts. A pull, a cold hand brushing the edges of her mind, searching for doors, testing locks. She resisted instinctively. The pressure intensified. Chakotay staggered back, clutching his head. Harry gasped, dropping to one knee. Tuvok stood firm, but Janeway saw his jaw clench, tiny but telling. The Inquisitor's voice lowered into something almost intimate. "You cannot hide your thoughts from the dark side, nor can you hide the truth." Janeway felt the intrusion scraping at her memories, searching for images of warp cores, Federation protocols, shield modulations. She summoned every ounce of her will, every lesson in command discipline, every memory of the Academy's mental resilience training. "Get out of my mind," she growled through clenched teeth. The pressure paused, then receded. Not in defeat, in amusement. "You have strength," the Inquisitor said softly. "But strength is not immunity." He stepped back. Ravel exhaled, as if freed from a held breath. Janeway remained standing, barely. The Inquisitor turned toward the stormtroopers. "Prepare them," he commanded. "I will speak with their captain again after the Emperor is informed." He walked away, the invisible field swirling in his wake like a storm cloud. Ravel snapped his heels together. "Captain Janeway, your ship and your crew are now under Imperial custody." The stormtroopers moved in. Janeway lifted her chin. "We survived the Borg," she said quietly. "We'll survive you." Ravel's smile was thin. "We shall see." As the guards closed in, Janeway felt again the brush of the Force along her consciousness, not invasive this time, merely watching, studying, judging, and she understood with crystalline clarity. Voyager had not been captured by the Empire. Voyager had been noticed by something far worse. The moment the Inquisitor's presence faded from the chamber, something else lingered behind, an unwanted echo, a resonance in the air that should not have existed. It clung to Janeway's thoughts like smoke. Logic told her the experience had been psychological, her instincts whispered otherwise. She steadied herself, but Chakotay still rubbed his temples, pale from the mental pressure. Harry pushed himself from the floor with trembling arms. Tuvok alone held firm, though Janeway saw the subtle tremor in his stance, a sign only a fellow officer would recognize. "We need to regroup," Janeway murmured. Before anyone could respond, stormtroopers moved in, forming a white wall of armored bodies. Their blasters remained lowered, but their presence was a declaration in itself. "You will come with us," Commander Ravel ordered, his tone clipped. "Your senior officers will be escorted to an interrogation suite. The rest of your crew will be processed separately." "Processed," Janeway repeated softly. "That's a troubling word, Commander." He shrugged, as though the fate of her crew was an administrative inconvenience. "Standard Imperial protocol. I'm sure every tyrant in history has said the same." His eyes hardened. "Captain, this galaxy does not belong to the gentle." Janeway's jaw tightened, but she said nothing. The troopers started forward, and then a tremor, small, soft, but unmistakable. Voyager's deck plates vibrated beneath their feet. Chakotay looked up sharply. "That wasn't us." Tuvok checked his tricorder. "A localized gravitational fluctuation. The Star Destroyer is adjusting internal mass distribution." But Tuvok's calm didn't fool Janeway. She could see the tension behind his control. "Commander Ravel," Janeway said. "What was that?" He touched a device on his belt, listening to the faint comm chatter that followed. A shadow crossed his face. "A Jedi starfighter has entered the system," Ravel answered, voice lowering. "One of Skywalker's ilk, no doubt." The stormtroopers stiffened. "Is that a problem for you?" Janeway asked carefully. Ravel's lip curled. "For us, no. For you." His eyes flicked toward the Inquisitor's retreating path. "It complicates your situation." The corridor lights flickered. Once, twice, then held steady. But Janeway felt the air shift again, the same way she felt storms forming over oceans back on Earth. Pressure building, something bending reality at the edges. "Move," Ravel barked. "Quickly." Stormtroopers surrounded them, pushing them toward a pair of sealed blast doors deeper inside the destroyer, and Janeway immediately sensed something wrong. The deeper they went, the stronger the presence became, like stepping into a cathedral built for an invisible god. The Hall of Shadows. The blast doors parted with a heavy mechanical groan, revealing a long chamber lit in a red ambient glow. The air was colder here, thinner. Every breath felt like it passed through iron. "What is this place?" Chakotay whispered. Ravel didn't answer. The chamber walls were carved with grooves, patterns that Janeway recognized as conduits for energy, but not the kind she understood. Not plasma, not electricity, something older. Something that made tricorders glitch and flicker. "This ship," Tuvok said softly, "has been retrofitted for Force users." Janeway looked at him. "Meaning?" "Meaning," Tuvok replied, "that the Empire does not treat the Force as myth. They treat it as weaponry." Before Janeway could respond, a wave of cold rolled down the length of the chamber. The lights dimmed. The ventilation system shuddered, and then a hum, low, resonant, unnatural, filled the air. Harry stumbled. "Captain, readings are spiking everywhere. Chronoton fluctuations, magnetic distortions, neurological interference. This is like standing inside a storm of thought. Chakotay groaned, gripping the wall. Or inside someone's mind. Ravel turned sharply. Keep moving. Do not fall behind. Janeway felt her pulse sharpen. This wasn't just a room. This was an altar, built for interrogation, or something far worse. The interrogation suite. The chamber opened into a hemispherical room lined with black metal panels. A single circular platform stood in the center, illuminated by a lonely white beam of light. Something about it felt wrong, sterile, surgical, like a stage for pain. The stormtroopers positioned themselves around the perimeter. Ravel stepped aside as the doors sealed behind them with an ominous hiss. Janeway raised her voice. If this is a negotiation room, you're not making a very diplomatic impression. No negotiation, Ravel said. Assessment. He turned to Tuvok. You, he said, step forward. Tuvok complied, his Vulcan calm, unwavering. Janeway moved instinctively to stop him, but a stormtrooper's hand landed on her shoulder, firm and unyielding. Captain, Tuvok said softly, I will be fine. But Janeway wasn't convinced. The air vibrated strangely, as though someone was tuning the frequencies of their own thoughts. Suddenly, thoom, a soundless pulse rippled through the chamber. Harry staggered. Chakotay grabbed his head. Janeway felt a pressure, faint but invasive, like a hand dipping into cold water, except the water was her mind. Commander, she snapped, what are you doing? But Ravel looked uneasy too. This isn't us, he said. It's him. The temperature plummeted. A figure entered through a side door, black robes trailing behind him like spilled ink. The Inquisitor returned, but this time his presence was far heavier. The Force seemed to warp around him, bending the air like heat waves off desert stone. Tuvok's eyes widened, the closest thing to fear a Vulcan displayed. The Inquisitor stepped into the central beam of light. Begin, he said. Stormtroopers activated consoles at the edges of the room. Panels hummed. The platform lit with a pale blue glow. Janeway shouted, Stop this, Tuvok hasn't done anything. He exists, the Inquisitor answered flatly. That is enough. He extended a gloved hand. Tuvok stiffened. The room darkened. And the Force struck. The Force tests the mind of a Vulcan. Tuvok staggered not physically, but mentally. His hands twitched as invisible pressure squeezed around his skull. His eyes fluttered, pupils dilating. The Inquisitor's voice was a whisper of blades. Your mind is disciplined, structured, logical, but logic blinds you to the deeper truth. The Force is not chaos, it is order, a rigid, merciless order. Janeway lunged forward, but slammed against an invisible barrier. A shimmering red shimmer, hardly visible, blocked her path. Let him go, she shouted. The Inquisitor ignored her. Tell me, Vulcan, he purred, does your logic explain why your ship was drawn across galaxies? Why the fabric of destiny tore open for you? Why the Force rippled when you came? Tuvok gasped, and Janeway's heart clenched at the sound Vulcans never gasped. I do not know, Tuvok managed, breathless. That is because you walk in darkness, the Inquisitor said, and call it enlightenment. The Force tightened. Janeway saw the lights flicker. Tuvok's memories flashed across his expression: family, meditation candles, the academy, years of discipline. The Inquisitor's voice grew colder. You cannot hide what you fear. Tuvok trembled. Janeway's voice cracked. Enough. He did not stop. This wasn't interrogation. This was vivisection. The breaking point. Tuvok fell to one knee. Chakotay shouted. Harry lunged forward. The barrier flared and hurled them backward. The Inquisitor closed his hand slowly, as though crushing an invisible sphere. Tuvok's breath hitched. Janeway felt the moment between heartbeats, the point where a mind either breaks or ascends to something else. And then, something unexpected happened. Tuvok whispered, My fear is not for myself. The room stilled. Even the Inquisitor paused. It is for them. Tuvok finished, lifting his eyes toward his captain, and Janeway felt something inside her shatter. Not fear, not despair, a burning, fierce resolve. The Inquisitor lowered his hand not in mercy, but in contemplation. "This one," he said quietly, "cannot be broken easily." He turned away. "Take him. The Emperor will decide his fate." The barrier vanished. Tuvok collapsed into Chakotay's arms. Janeway rushed to his side. His voice was barely a whisper. "Captain, the Force is not energy. It is will." She swallowed hard. "And his is stronger than ours." The Inquisitor paused at the doorway, his silhouette framed in crimson light. "The next one," he said, "will be you, Captain Janeway." And then he was gone, leaving Voyager's crew in a room carved for suffering, leaving Janeway with the crushing truth. She was no longer up against an empire. She was up against destiny, and destiny had teeth. The chamber felt emptier after the Inquisitor's departure, yet somehow heavier. His presence lingered like a stain on the air, an echo of pressure that Janeway could still feel brushing against the edges of her thoughts. Tuvok rested against Chakotay's shoulder, breathing slowly, deliberately, fighting to rebuild the pristine interior of his Vulcan mind. His stillness was not peaceful. It was defensive, an animal closing its wounds before another predator circled back. Janeway knelt beside him. "Tuvok," she whispered, "are you with us?" His eyelids fluttered. "Yes, Captain, He paused, choosing the most precise word. "Am recovering." But Janeway could see it. A fracture. Not in his logic, but in his certainty. "Tuvok," Chakotay murmured. "What did he do to you?" Tuvok exhaled, long and controlled. "He did not read my mind," Tuvok said quietly. "He pressed his will into it." Chakotay frowned. "Like a telepath?" "No," Tuvok answered. "Telepathy is an exchange of thoughts. This was not an exchange. This was an imposition." Janeway felt the words strike deeper than intended. Because they weren't just describing what happened. They were describing the Force. A phenomenon that reached into minds, bent decisions, nudged outcomes. A phenomenon the Empire weaponized. The implications were terrifying. If the Force could override logic, what chance did Starfleet training stand? What chance did she stand? The Empire returns. The blast door hissed again. Stormtroopers marched in 4, then 6, then a dozen. Their boots thudded in unison, a rhythm of absolute control. Ravel followed them, his expression unreadable. Behind him came 2 dark-robed figures. Inquisitors, apprentices of the darkness, their presence already tugging at Janeway's thoughts. "Captain," Ravel said, "you will come with us." Chakotay stepped between them. "She's not going anywhere." Ravel gave him a thin, cold smile. "You misunderstand. She is going everywhere." 2 stormtroopers raised their rifles. "Stand down," Janeway ordered, stepping in front of Chakotay. "No one else gets hurt today." Chakotay clenched his jaw but obeyed. Tuvok, still weakened, attempted to rise. "Captain." Janeway touched his shoulder. "No, not this time. I go alone." Her voice was steady, but inside, fear coiled like a serpent. The first Inquisitor had broken Tuvok. What would they do to her? Into the mall. They escorted her down a corridor that felt less like a hallway and more like a windpipe, narrow, metallic, pulsing with the heartbeat of a monstrous machine. The Force thickened as they walked, brushing her mind with a presence that felt curious and hungry. Her tricorder hung at her side, powerless in this place. Scans returned static. Matter itself refused to remain neutral. A stormtrooper keyed a sequence into a wall panel. A door slid open to reveal a circular chamber, larger than the last, suffused with dim blue light. The walls were lined with strange metallic ribs, conductors for energy, but not of any kind Janeway recognized. The hum was back. Resonant. Insistent. Alive. The Inquisitor from before waited at the center. But something was different. The air bent around him, rippling with waves of distortion. Not violent, purposeful. He turned slowly, his attention locking onto her with predatory precision. Janeway's pulse hammered, but she steadied herself. "Captain Janeway," he said, at last. She stood tall. "You wanted me. I'm here." "Indeed. The Force has questions for you." "The Force," she repeated, as if tasting the word. "Or you." He gave a slight tilt of his head. "We are not separate." Janeway forced a breath. "Then you won't mind if I decline to participate?" His reply was simple. "You cannot." He extended his hand, and the world folded inward, the mind under siege. It began as pressure, soft, curious, almost gentle. Then it sharpened, like a spike driven between thoughts. Janeway staggered. "Jiga." Her knees buckled, but she refused to fall. The Inquisitor stepped forward, and the air bent around him like gravity itself was kneeling. "Your mind is disciplined," he murmured. "Strong, sharper than most, and yet fragile." Janeway's vision blurred. Memory flickered, moments, faces, events. The first day she stepped aboard Voyager, her father's smile, the Ocampa homeworld, the caretaker array, the endless Delta Quadrant. She clenched her jaw. "Stay." "Out." The Inquisitor's voice slipped inside her thoughts like a blade sliding between ribs. "You mistake this for intrusion. It is revelation." He seized onto an image her crew gathered at the mess hall, laughing despite their circumstances. Janeway snarled, "Get out of their faces." The Inquisitor paused, not in caution, in interest. "You resist, not for yourself," he said slowly, "but for them." A cruel warmth crept into his voice. Attachment, emotion, a flaw, a weakness. Janeway glared through the pain. "It's what makes us human." The Inquisitor leaned close. "It is what makes you vulnerable." The Force surged. Janeway felt herself ripping, not physically, mentally, as if her thoughts were being pried apart and rearranged. Her command training fought back. Her will ignited like a star against the dark. "No," she whispered. "No, you don't get to decide who I am." The Inquisitor's breath hissed through the mask. "Then show me." He reached deeper. Janeway felt memories pulling away one by one. Chakotay's loyalty, Tuvok's wisdom, B'Elanna's fire, Seven's growth, Harry's innocence, Tom's courage. Each memory threatened to snap under the weight of his probing. Janeway screamed, but not in fear, in defiance. The fracture, then, a flicker. Something else stirred in the chamber. A presence that did not belong to the Empire. Not dark, not cold. Something luminous, distant, but undeniably real. The Inquisitor froze mid-motion. His hand trembled. Janeway felt the pressure falter, just enough to breathe. His helmet snapped toward the ceiling, as though sensing something far off, some ripple in the web of the Force. "No," he whispered. "Not now. Not here." The stormtroopers at the door shifted uneasily. Janeway, gasping, forced herself upright. "What is it?" she rasped. The Inquisitor didn't look at her. "Someone approaches." The lights flickered violently. The hum in the room spiked, and Janeway felt the Force tighten around the entire ship like a clenched fist. Not the dark side. Something else. Something that opposed it. Her heart twisted with a strange mixture of dread and hope. The Inquisitor hissed through his mask. "A Jedi." The word hung like a thunderclap. "Impossible." Ravel's voice crackled over the comm. "Lord Inquisitor, Skywalker himself." "Not Skywalker," the Inquisitor snapped. "Someone older." Janeway swallowed. Older meant dangerous. Older meant powerful. Older meant the balance of this galaxy was shifting, and Voyager was the fulcrum. The Inquisitor's next words were tight with growing fear. "Prepare her transport. We move before he arrives." Janeway steadied herself, lifting her chin despite the tremors in her legs. "You're afraid." His mask turned toward her slow, venomous. "Fear," he said softly, is the only thing that keeps this galaxy honest." He raised his hand. Troopers surged forward. The Force swelled like a storm breaking, and Janeway realized her torment was not the end. It was the beginning. A Jedi was coming, and the Force, light and dark, was converging on Voyager like predators closing in on prey. The world blurred into motion. 2 stormtroopers seized Janeway's arms, dragging her from the interrogation dais as the Inquisitor swept toward the exit. His robes lashed behind him like shadows torn from the floor. The Force pulsed erratically around him, no longer a controlled tide but a storm breaking against metal walls. "Move," he snarled. "He is near." Janeway stumbled forward, legs trembling from the mental assault, vision flickering with residual pain. Yet she lifted her head, forcing clarity into her gaze. "Who is coming?" she demanded. "Who are you afraid of?" The Inquisitor didn't answer. That silence alone told her everything. Fear. A Sith-trained hunter feared what was coming. That meant whoever drew near was powerful enough to challenge the Empire's chosen executioners, and reckless, perhaps, to face them inside the belly of a star destroyer. The Force trembled. Reality quivered. And Janeway felt it again. The faint, gentle presence she had sensed at the height of her torment. Not cold. Not invasive. A warmth. A steadying hand at the edge of perception. But distant. Struggling to reach through steel and darkness. A Jedi. Not a soldier. Not a tyrant. A beacon in a galaxy ruled by shadow. Voyager under siege. Meanwhile, Voyager felt the shift. The hull groaned subtly. Lights dimmed, then brightened. The inertial dampeners flickered, causing a brief stagger among the crew still trapped aboard. Something unseen pressed against the ship like an incoming tide. In engineering, B'Elanna Torres slammed her fist against a console. "None of this makes sense. Our readings keep spiking like we're inside a warp bubble and a gravity well at the same time." 7 of 9 tilted her head, eyes narrowing. "Incorrect. The gravitational distortions do not originate from this vessel or from the Star Destroyer. They are external." "External how?" B'Elanna demanded. 7 hesitated. "As if a massive spatial force is bending local reality to create a corridor," she said. "Not technology. Something." Her voice dropped. "Alive." Tom Paris stared at the flickering lights. "You mean someone's warping space manually?" 7's eyes hardened. "No. Someone is bending the Force." The entire deck shuddered as if acknowledging her words. The Inquisitors retreat. The Inquisitor moved quickly down the corridor, each step fueled by urgency. Stormtroopers flanked them, others fell in behind, forming a protective shell around their commander and his prisoner. "Captain." Chakotay's voice crackled over a nearby console before Ravel cut the channel. "We're coming for you. Hold on." Janeway's heart twisted. Chakotay. Tuvok. Her crew. Still fighting. Still refusing to surrender. But she knew now. This was no longer a simple rescue mission. It was something cosmic. Something mythic. Voyager had become a point of convergence. A tear between galaxies. A beacon. A target. The Inquisitor stopped abruptly. The Force surged, and Janeway felt a crackle in the air. Metallic. Sharp. Unmistakable. A lightsaber igniting somewhere far away. The dark-robed figure hissed with fury. "He is aboard." The 2 presences. The Force bent violently, whipping through the corridors like a storm wind. Panels sparked, lights shattered, stormtroopers staggered as though hit by invisible waves. Janeway was thrown to her knees. Pain lanced through her mind, not from invasion this time, but from sheer pressure. 2 presences filled the air. One cold. One luminous. They were hunting each other. No, Janeway realized they were converging on her. The Inquisitor whirled on his soldiers. "Take her. Now." A trooper activated a portable restraint field, generating a glowing cage around Janeway. It hummed with electricity, locking around her like translucent shackles. The Inquisitor pointed at her. "She is the anomaly. The Force reacts to her. Do not lose her. Janeway's breath hitched. The Force reacts to her? How? She wasn't Force sensitive. She wasn't trained. She wasn't part of this galaxy. Unless crossing between galaxies had done something. Unless the rift had marked her. Unless... The floor trembled violently. A blast door in the distance exploded outward, showering sparks. White armored bodies flew backwards, slammed by an invisible force. A hooded figure stepped through the smoke. The Seand eyes out. The Jedi arrives. He moved like wind given human shape. Silent, effortless, deadly. A flash of green light filled the corridor. A lightsaber vibrant, humming with a resonant warmth that contrasted sharply with the Inquisitor's crimson void. Stormtroopers raised blasters. The Jedi's blades swept in graceful arcs, deflecting shots, redirecting energy, moving with uncanny precision. He didn't rush. He didn't roar. He was stillness given form. The Inquisitor ignited his blade with a vicious hiss. Red and green collided, casting violent shadows. Janeway could do nothing but watch, trapped in her restraint field, heart racing, mind splitting between terror and awe. The Jedi's voice was calm, steady, infused with gravity. You will release the captain. The Inquisitor answered with venom. She does not belong in your light, Jedi. Then she belongs in neither of our shadows. Their blades crashed, sparks flying, the metal around them groaning from pressure. Janeway struggled against the field. The energy stung her skin. Her muscles shook with effort. She didn't know who this Jedi was. She didn't know why the Force had brought him here. But she understood one thing with perfect clarity. He came for her. The duel, red and green, clashed again, the Force erupting outward. Stormtroopers were thrown against walls. Ceiling panels rained down. Janeway's restraint field flickered wildly, destabilized by the energy waves. The Inquisitor snarled, thrusting forward with a surge of the dark side. The Jedi pivoted gracefully, redirecting the attack into the metal wall, leaving a molten scar. The Jedi's tone remained controlled. Your obsession blinds you. She is not your key. She is the breach, the Inquisitor spat. The Force screams around her. Her arrival tore destiny apart. The Emperor himself has foreseen it. Janeway's heart froze. Foreseen? The Emperor. She was the anomaly, not Voyager. Not the crew. Her. The Jedi shifted his stance, eyes narrowing beneath the hood. Then the Emperor fears what he cannot control. The Inquisitor roared, launching forward with renewed fury. Janeway saw the restraint field stutter. Once, twice, then collapse with a shimmering pop. She fell forward onto the deck. Her lungs seized with the shock of sudden freedom. The Jedi reached out a hand not to her, but toward something unseen. A rush of invisible power slammed into the Inquisitor, sending him skidding backward across the floor. The dark-robed figure rose, trembling with rage. This is not finished. He gestured sharply. Stormtroopers scrambled forward. The Jedi lifted his hand. A wave of energy surged outward, sweeping all of them off their feet. Then he turned to Janeway. His voice was lower now. Softer. Urgent. Captain, he said, we must leave. The balance of the Force depends on it. Janeway stared at him, breathless. Why me? The Jedi held out his hand. Because, he said, you weren't pulled into this galaxy. His lightsaber flared brighter. You were summoned. The air around Janeway trembled with a pressure she could not name. Not the Empire. Not the Inquisitor. Not even the titanic machinery of the Star Destroyer groaning beneath the clash of blades. It was something else. Something vast. Something ancient. Something watching. And it was watching her. The Jedi extended his hand again, this time gently, urgently. Captain Janeway, he said, voice quiet beneath the hum of his saber, your presence in this galaxy did not happen to the Force. A blast of static cracked through the air as another set of stormtroopers rounded the corner. It happened because of the Force. He pulled her to her feet just as blaster fire erupted. Green light carved arcs of luminous protection around them. Shots ricocheted, striking walls, ceiling, armored bodies. The Jedi moved with an elegance and ferocity Janeway could barely process. He was a contradiction. War embodied in the form of peace. Violence wielded by serenity. A paradox. A weapon. A guardian. And he was terrified. Not of the troopers. Not even of the Inquisitor recovering at the far end of the hall. He was terrified of time. Of consequences. Of her. A tear in destiny. "Why was I brought here?" Janeway demanded, ducking behind a support pillar as blaster bolts scorched the metal beside her. The Jedi pushed forward, redirecting a barrage of energy with a single sweeping motion. "Because your galaxy was never meant to touch ours." "That doesn't answer my question." He turned, eyes fierce beneath the hood. "The Force does not speak in answers," he said. "Only in warnings." The metal beneath their feet rumbled. Far away in the Star Destroyer's depths, a seismic boom echoed evidence of the Inquisitor's rage breaking something structural. The dark side rippled, a wave of cold flooding the ship. The Jedi flinched, gripping a wall for balance. His lightsaber dimmed for a heartbeat. "The dark side is moving," he whispered. He knows now what the Emperor saw. Janeway felt a chill crawl up her spine. And what exactly did he see? The Jedi's expression tightened. "You." The revelation. They reached a central junction, vast, cavernous, filled with catwalks and deep shafts lit by tremoring crimson lights. The Jedi deactivated his saber and faced her fully. "I felt it the moment you arrived," he said. "A tear in the continuum, a fracture, something that should not be." "I'm not Force-sensitive," Janeway insisted. "My crew and I were caught in a spatial anomaly." "No," he said firmly. "Your ship was caught. You were chosen." Janeway stepped back. "Chosen by what?" "By the same power that chooses all things," he said softly. "The Force." She shook her head. "That's mythology, philosophy, a poetic metaphor for a field generated by midichlorians?" The Jedi finished for her. Janeway stiffened. "How do you?" "Because the Empire believes only in what it can measure," he said. "The Jedi believe in what measures them." He took another step toward her. "You are a nexus point. Two galaxies bending around one consciousness. Two destinies tied by your presence." "That's impossible," she whispered. "I know," he replied, "which is why it happened. The weight of two galaxies." Blaster fire erupted again from the far corridor. Troopers poured in. The Inquisitor's silhouette grew in the smoky distance. Blade lit, crackling with crimson hunger. "He's coming!" Janeway shouted. The Jedi ignited his saber. "Then we don't have much time." He thrust his free hand toward a maintenance hatch overhead. The metal screeched, tore free, and slammed against the wall. A shaft led deeper into the destroyer's infrastructure. "Go," he commanded. But Janeway hesitated. "My crew. They'll survive if you do," he said. "The Force is converging on you, not them." The Inquisitor's roar echoed through the chamber. "You cannot escape destiny, Jedi." The Jedi's eyes locked onto Janeway's. "You must choose," he said. "Return to Voyager and flee this galaxy, or stay and shift the fate of millions." Janeway froze. Science had taught her to distrust prophecy. Starfleet trained her to resist mysticism, but the Force pressed around her like a tide, whispering truths she didn't want to hear. She saw flashes. Voyager caught between starfleets, the Emperor reaching through the Force toward her mind, the Inquisitor dragging her across a throne room floor. A war she did not understand, and herself at the center. Not as prisoner, not as savior, as catalyst. "Why me?" she whispered. The Jedi looked at her with a sadness that felt older than stars. "Because your galaxy knows freedom," he said, "and ours is forgetting it." The diverging paths. The corridor behind them collapsed inward as the Inquisitor hurled a storm of debris with the Force. The Jedi grabbed Janeway's arm. "Now, Captain." He leapt upward, pulling her into the maintenance shaft just as a crimson blade slashed through the floor where she had stood. They climbed through the narrow passage, the Jedi twisting gravity with the Force to propel them upward. Below, the Inquisitor's voice thundered. "You cannot hide her forever. She belongs to the Emperor. She belongs to us." Janeway shivered. Not from cold. From truth. Something in this galaxy really did want her. Something powerful enough to cross realities. The final choice. They emerged into a control room overlooking the hangar bay. Voyager sat below, small, damaged, but defiant. The Force pulsed around it like a halo. The Jedi pointed. "Your crew is preparing to escape. They need you." Down below, she saw Chakotay yelling orders. Be Elana rerouting power. Tuvok limping but resolute. Paris warming the engines. Her family. Her responsibility. Then the Jedi spoke again, his voice filled with gravity. "But if you leave, you must never return." Janeway's breath caught. "What?" "Two galaxies cannot intertwine without consequence," he said. "You are a fracture, a bridge, a wound." His eyes softened. "And wounds either heal, or they bleed." The hangar doors began to rumble open. The Jedi had triggered them. Alarms blared across the Star Destroyer. "You must decide," he said. "Escape, or purpose." The Inquisitor's cry echoed behind them, closer now, filled with wrath and prophecy. "Janeway." The Jedi pressed a code cylinder into her hand. "For your ship, for your crew, use it to run." Janeway stared at him. "What about you?" His green blade ignited with a low, mournful hum. "I will stop him." She felt the Force swirl. Around her, through her, as if nudging her toward her fate. Janeway looked down at her ship, then at the darkness behind her, then at the Jedi before her, and she understood. No galaxy, not hers, not this one, would be the same after she chose. She tightened her grip on the cylinder. The Jedi nodded. "Go, Captain. The Force is not done with you." Janeway ran. Behind her, green and red collided, and the galaxy trembled.